I'm just going to talk about the trail wrist as far as in the flexion extension rather than the whole thing and talk about patterns, because we could go on for days and days. All right, measuring the trail wrist and putting. Okay. All right, so obviously we got a lot of people out there using it for full swing, short game, putting. It's just a great device. And the reason why I use two sensors is cut back on time. So rather than, you know, having it on one, taking it off on the other, all I have to do is disconnect the lead wrist and then connect the trail wrist, go into the session and make the change from trail wrist or from lead wrist to trail wrist. So they are not capturing at the same time. I do this as a way of saving time, and the students actually like it because we can flip from lead wrist to trail wrist back and forth. And obviously this is an 11-year-old. I'm going to play it again. We're using biofeedback here. This is about a 30-foot putt, and typically I measure from 10 foot, 20 foot, 30 foot. Obviously the shorter the distance, the less the wrist motion. The longer the distance, you start getting some wrist motion. What's ironic is this kid using biofeedback, she had very minimal change in trail wrist extension or flexion going back and then coming to impact. And then as she's coming through impact, you'll see a slight extension into the finish. And I'll explain why that happens here in a little bit.
11 years old, working on lead wrist first, trail wrist second, using HackMotion. We've got two sensors and using biofeedback. Very good. No wrist in the backswing, correct? And no wrist to impact. That was good. And then a slight brush upward, correct? So that slight brushing upward is what's going to change the flexion extension in the lead wrist and the trail wrist. Good.
Yeah, so that's what almost no wrist looks like from about 30 feet. And what's interesting is the feedback is I don't have any power. So as you take away motion from one joint and the segment below and the segment above, which would be the hand and the forearm, you have to recruit it from somewhere else, because we're dealing with coordination. We're dealing with a coordinative structure that starts from the finger into the fingers and thumbs, into the hand, into the wrist, into the forearm, into the elbow, the upper arm, the shoulder, shoulder blade, shoulder complex, torso, etc. So you're dealing with a kinetic chain. And what's interesting is because you're seeing no wrist movement, it's not really coming from the wrist by itself. It's getting the hand speed and the forearm motion to be coordinated to produce minimal wrist action. All right, so let's go on to the next frame. Okay, so the disaster stroke, I call it. This is a trail wrist moving into flexion in the backswing. I call it a carrying motion. So if I were to take this backpack, I don't know if everybody can see me. Let me tilt my screen up a little bit, but if I were to take this backpack so you can see the basic structure, there's already a little bit of extension in both wrists, and at address, the forearm alignment is huge. This is a huge component, is getting the arm alignment, specifically the forearm alignments. If we start carrying the handle up and in and combine that with the intent of keeping the face square, you'll notice that I increased lead wrist extension, but I also did trail wrist flexion. You'll typically see this from players trying to keep the face square to something. You'll see the upper arm moving away, the forearm, the butt of the club lifting, the carrying, and then the throwing. Okay, and the throw being from the right hand right on the downswing. So you can see, let's take a look at the picture on the left with the animation. You can see how the right shoulder is going into elevation. The upper arm is actually moving into abduction, possibly some internal rotation, which is typically rare, and maybe some forearm pronation as a result of the elbow lengthening. So this player is just trying to rock their shoulders and keep the face square. And you can see the trajectory of the butt of the club in the backswing, which is yellow. It's moving up. But if you look at the trajectory of the butt of the club, or the sweet spot, it's not moving up at the same rate or same radius. And then on the downswing, you'll see the butt of the club moving down. So I don't know if everybody can see that, but the butt of the club is moving from high to low in the downswing. And this trajectory of this hand path and the butt of the club combined with forearm motion and intent is what's creating this. And intent might be really the underlying cause of trying to keep the face square, rock my shoulders. Next thing I know, the club face we've added loft supposedly in the backswing. And if we see that in the graph, you can see that it didn't start off that way, but as you get near to the top of the swing, it's starting to increase. And then as they start to push the handle forward, it might change a little bit. And then through impact, you'll see a little bit of throw. That's the butt of the club going down. So anytime you see that green line moving into more flexion after impact or going downward, look at the butt of the club first. Look at the hand relative to the forearm. So basically, let me just kind of do that. So here I am. If the butt of the club's going down and the right arm is lengthening, you can see that. So this is carry, carry, and throw. Carry and throw. All right? Somebody trying to keep the putter head low on the follow through, you might see some flexion changes. So any change in the segment of the hand, even the forefinger, any change relative to the forearm, and then obviously it's affecting the radial ulnar in many cases, and also the pronation, supination of the arm. So you need to understand that it's not just the wrist by itself. There's a linkage there, like I said, from the finger, thumb and finger, hand, wrist, forearm, elbow, upper arm, into the shoulder complex itself. So it's not just the wrist. Okay, let's do another one. All right, trail wrist moving into extension in the backswing. And this is pretty normal, I see, from strokes from the 70s, 80s, and 90s, which is the era I grew up in. We were taught to set up a little bit more open and ball forward, handle forward, and we're taught to take the putter low. And what's interesting is the lead wrist will move into flexion. The left lead elbow will go from flexion to extension. But the trail side, the trail elbow is flexing. You can see that. So the putter is now, the butt of the club's going down. Okay, and the forearms are actually making like a brushing motion from low to high. So when this forearm, this hand and forearm are brushing upward, okay, you can see the lead hand, lead wrist, lead forearm, lead elbow brushing upward. The trajectory of the butt of the club is coming up. You get what's called a brush hold. And I actually have a broom where I have people feeling like they're brushing, and that upward motion is creating that slight extension. Now, this graph is exaggerated. This graph is exaggerated into one of these little moves. All right, so really like a super exaggerated Rory or a super exaggerated Phil Mickelson, Bryce Mulder, I think. All right, so, but you can see the trajectory of the butt of the club and the forearm motion creating a brush hold with the intent of keeping the putter low on the way through, and possibly the intent of putting a little top spin English on the ball. So de-lofted in a very sharp rise angle through impact. Okay, here's the before and an after. So let's see if I can see those again. So this is a guy, his intent was to take it back short, to accelerate and fall through. All of these changes were made in less than an hour. So if you watch this guy over and over, balls back, let's just take a look at the alignment of the wrist at address. Okay, so the forearms are actually to the trail side of the sagittal plane, which is creating a little bit of lead wrist extension, trail wrist flexion already, and it's already supinated. And you can see that he's very, very trail side oriented. All right, so he's going to have a slight carry in the backswing because the stroke's like this long on a 30-foot putt. And the ball position's back, so he kind of looks a little Zach Johnson-ish, Corey Pavin looking, but the ball location's a little too far back. takes it back like short, over accelerate. You see the trail arm, trail hand throw on the follow through. So you can see he's adding loft. All right, so is the fix here the wrist by itself? No. The fix here is changing the orientation of the hands relative to each other, the grip orientation. It's changing the elbow and forearm alignments, both in the lateral plane and also in the sagittal plane. Okay, and you're getting the alignments of the hands to be in a better orientation for the forearms relative to the body. So let's take a look at after an hour. And I would say that's pretty significant. If you don't think that's significant, then I ain't got nothing but better for you. I mean, in less than an hour. So we've reduced the hand throw, we reduced the trail arm throw. And what's interesting is in the first stroke, because the concept was take it back short, accelerate, and follow through. And you can see he's got a lot of sway, a lot of gross movements of the body. So take it back short, accelerate, follow through. So just that phrase is destroying this cat, as you can see. And then what we did was we started with learning, obviously getting a better orientation of the forearms. To him, it felt like the forearms were just left of the navel. Okay, and getting the wrist alignments this way, especially the trail wrist, getting the wrist alignments, and then for him, getting him to balance out the amount of force in the backswing and the amount of force in the downswing, and actually teaching him that an object accelerates not just toward the target, but an object accelerates away from the target in the backswing, in the transition toward the target, and then on the way through, the acceleration vector goes back the other way. So getting him to learn to stop. So this was pretty cool. Let's just watch that one more time. All right, so you can see them real quick. Take it back short, accelerate, follow through. Okay. And now we're going to take a look at some of the changes. So you can see right off the bat, ball location changed, shaft lean changed, hand location. So you can see now there is some wrist extension in that trail wrist. You can see that the right thumb is shorter and the trail forefinger is longer, right wrist and a little bit more ulnar deviation, elbow a little bit more flexing. And then you can definitely see a change in how he applies force, especially in the backswing. So getting him to apply acceleration in the backswing is what produced that, and then learning to hold or brush up. And I thought that looked pretty good. So the trail arm is still throwing, but the trail wrist is a little bit more in control as far as extension. Absolute values vary from calibration to calibration, from player to player. Study the grass individually, and then all together. Test from 10, 20, 30 feet. No one had zero wrist motion except that little girl when she was on the biofeedback. She's 11-year-old from all three distances. Certain wrist sequences are compatible and functional. And transition wrist motion is key. Whether you're lagging it like I do or throwing it the club head ahead of the handle on the downswing, transition wrist motions are key.
So one of the questions is, so what's about yips? Any commonalities in putting yips in your?
Yeah, 100%. Well, putting yips come from, well, you have to identify what kind of yip is it. If it's a rotational yip, typically there's a conflict in the technique. And then obviously, so like, for instance, the system as a whole is going clockwise in the backswing and counterclockwise in the through swing. But if you have a counter steering or a counter rotation to that, trying to keep the face square, you're going to start developing that pattern. And then obviously throw in a little bit of stress, a little bit of pressure, a little bit of trauma that you've missed a couple short ones in the past, and you start getting the yips. And then obviously acceleration yips would be another type of yip. I would say that gentleman that we were seeing with the short back accelerate and fall through dude would be very prone to yippy motion. His wrist would not be very stable, nor would the rotation of the club be very stable.
Mhm.
It's definitely a brain thing. Here's what people understand. They go like, is it technique or is it mental? It's a brain thing. Your brain controls movement, and your brain also controls emotions and has memory and trauma. It's a brain thing, folks. You can't separate them like, oh, if I fix this technique, will that change the yip? Well, it may or may not. It's a neurological issue usually, and emotionally, it's an anticipatory anxiety issue as well. So, and then you got to deal with trauma. So it's a multi-layer onion. Rather than, okay, you got the yips, can you just fix it? You know what I mean? So, and I have fixed a lot of people. One guy who came to me was going to quit the game, Jeff Mick. I actually put him in the claw because it was a new pattern in the brain with a heel shafted blade, an 8802. Who does that? I mean, it completely got rid of the yips. The guy was about to I think he wanted to hug me or kiss me or something. But now he's playing golf. He was going to quit. Now he's shooting in the mid-70s, and he's happy. So, I mean, a claw with a heel shafted blade. Who would go there? You know what I'm saying?
And is the trail wrist measurement possibility beneficial more for curing yips for you?
Yeah, well, I think that's where the primary. We've been so over flooded with lead side information with 3D equipment. I've been doing 3D for 8 years, and I started doing trail wrist 8 years ago with Dr. Neal's GBD system. So I knew that a lot of people are applying force with the trail hand too early and the trail arm. The vast majority of golfers do not deliver the golf club with their shoulders. They might feel like they are, maybe in the backswing, but the vast majority of golfers are delivering the golf club. I can sit there all day long and on our putting green and watch golfer after golfer after golfer. The trail side is the primary means of delivering the golf club for the most golfers. Not every golfer, but most golfers. That's why I wanted you to come up with a trail wrist system so we can measure it very quickly.
Well, one question is about why do bad putters have such long follow-throughs?
Because they're taught to follow through. They have to accelerate, and their concept of acceleration is that way. Their concept isn't away from the ball, back to the ball, and then on the follow through, it's back that way. That's why you see some players recoil, because the amount of jerk, which is a change of acceleration from the trail arm, you'll see players with the trail arm, they'll recoil. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's because it's coming from the trail side, and the acceleration deceleration graph is very sharp. Whereas players that come to a nice smooth stop, their rate of acceleration wasn't as sharp. Their rate of deceleration wasn't as sharp over a longer period of time. Makes sense? I show people all the time, how much follow through do you actually need? Here, I'll demonstrate. Can everybody see me? Yes?
Yep. Yes.
How much follow through do I need? That ball would have went at least 60 feet. Because all of the load, and it came to a very quick stop, which did what to the shaft that was loaded? It unloaded. So there was a high transfer of energy there. So it's just people have poor concepts, and because they have poor concepts, they have bad intentions. And notice how I put on each slide there was an intent. You see what I'm saying? We got to get to the cause of why you're seeing what you're seeing, and a lot of it's just crappy advice, crappy intentions. If you get their concepts right and their intentions right, start to build some pretty cool stuff, just like I did in less than an hour with that cat. That did not take long.
All right. A question about big grips and their effect. Is it why do some players go to big grips, and what is it, the positive and the negative?
Yeah. So to me, I'm a skier, if people can't tell. I ski on a narrow ski because I grew up on long skis, okay? So let me ask you this. How many top skiers in the FIS or the World Cup ski on a fat ski? None, because it makes you slows you down from edge to edge. A fat grip slows down rotation, okay? It also places the club more along the palm, and the finger should be down the shaft. If you hold the club across your hand and with your fingers, you should not be using one of these. So they're not good or bad. They're just a fad. That makes sense? And they're actually, if anybody's up to date with anything, big grips are on the way out. Just like fat skis are starting to get narrower and narrower again. Fat skis are for floating and out on powder. That's not what we ski on over here in the East. And matter of fact, that's not what the top racers ski on. But fat grips, the positive is if you want to put along your hand more and you want to put your fingers down the shaft more, but realize they're making your hands further apart this way, further apart this way, and further apart this way. Okay? But the vast majority of golfers I work with who use more of a pistol style formation of their fingers and thumb and hand, they use more of a mid-size pistol or a small pistol grip with wraps of tape underneath it, or if they got really little paws, we just put them with the smallest pistol grip you can get. So, but I'm not for nor against. As a matter of fact, it's really not the grip size that matters to me. It's the grip texture. I think these are mainly foam polyurethane grips, and they dampen the feedback from the club head. Whereas like rubber or even leather gives you the most feedback from the club and into your hands and fingers.
Mm-hmm. A lot of questions coming in. One is, what are the pros and cons of arm lock putting style in your experience?
Oh yeah, now arm lock's pretty good. Especially, I like the way Bryson's doing it by literally zeroing out degrees of freedom. I don't know how he contorts his arms, but wait a minute. You know what I mean? He's literally taking degrees of freedom away. Got it? Now, which in theory, if I was an engineer, that would be the way to do it. However, actually studying the degrees of freedom through the kinetic chain, the nervous system likes to use degrees of freedom to make mid-course adjustments and adaptations, whatever, compensations. But arm lock, I like the way Webb Simpson does it. You know, he kind of arm locks it and then he kind of does the claw with it. And it's really part of the brush stroke family, to be honest with you. The lead arm lock is actually not a pendulum style stroke. It's actually part of the brush stroke family. So yeah, lead arm lock's pretty good, especially when combined with the claw. It can be very effective on inside of 10 feet for sure.
Mm-hmm. The question there is if there are any optimal lead, trail, wrist, extension, flexion numbers that you like to see at different positions.
Numbers, you got to. I already said the numbers vary from calibration to calibration. The numbers vary from player to player. So make sure you write what I just said down. Write it down. The numbers vary. The graphs are the pattern of movement. So these people that, gosh, good thing I took my medication today. Anyway, stop it with the numbers, people. Start looking at the movement pattern. What are some good numbers? Okay, good numbers are 0. Zero it out everywhere. Can you? No, you can't. It's a motion. Putting strokes a motion. Golf swings are motions. There's many motions in a golf swing. There are many motions, separate motions in a putting stroke that we are coordinating. One of the motions of separation is, can I move my upper body and stabilize my lower body? Can I move my upper body and stabilize my head and neck? Does the head move? Yes, a little bit. Okay, can I move both arms and shoulders with minimalizing the wrist? Now we're at HackMotion. So there are separate movements that are, some are mobile and some are stable, and it is about coordination. Write that down. It is all about coordination. If you have somebody standing in front of you that lacks coordination, well, guess what? There's a reason why they suck at tennis. They suck at skiing. They suck at every sport they play, because they don't have coordination. And it takes coordination to play this game. Can you improve that coordination? 100%.
There's a question, do you feel a brush type stroke is best, and would it be more a lead side or trail side brush?
There's not a brush stroke. There's not a best. A brush stroke, a pendulum stroke is a pure rotation. Pure. No change in the radius, no change in the plane. It's pure rotation. Do we see that? No. Is a brush stroke better? No, not necessarily. It might feel more comfortable for players that set up more open and more tilted, like to look down the line. It might even give you good quintic numbers with launch and ball roll, but there's not a best. There's efficiency. Now we're talking. What's the most efficient technique for this player to be skillful? When I look at a player's putting, I'm looking at their skills and I'm going, okay, they're struggling with speed control uphill. Why is that? Oh, they're too de-lofted. They're too de-lofted, and they're launching the ball into the hole, into the slope. So in this case, a brush stroke would not be effective. But down the slope, a brush stroke would be very effective. Might even thin it. But there's not a best. There's efficiency. And what's the most efficient movement? What's the most coordinated movement? What can the player do when they're stressed? That's what I'm about.
Question, what is about Webb Simpsons technique that makes it so efficient?
I just told you. The lead side is locked, and the trail side is doing the in-plane motion. If I were the czar of putting, which I'm not, and USGA and the RNA did not call me or Phil Kenyon or any other putter experts, supposed experts, about the rule. The rule, in my opinion, is you have to control both ends of the club. So if both ends of the club are not moving freely, then to me, the rule should be different. But when you're taking this and putting this here, it's legal right now. Right now, it's legal. But is this moving freely? No, it's not. It'd have to be there. I think the way Kuchar does it, it's a little more free. You'll see the butt of the club kind of move a little bit. You see what I'm saying? But they didn't think that way. They didn't call Phil Kenyon. They didn't call Paul Hurrian. They sure as hell didn't call me when they made this rule. And
question, what's your take on claw grip? Would you teach it or avoid it?
Well, yeah, I was the one that taught it to Justin Rose. I'll tell you the true story. So we're at Albany in the Bahamas in 2015, and Adam Scott's on the putting green practicing putting, and Rosie goes, what in the hell is he doing? I say, he's doing the claw. He goes, go over there and ask him what he's doing. So I go over there and I ask Adam, and Adam, being the gentleman that he is, he's an awesome dude. He goes, yeah, sure, mate. This is what I'm doing. He spent 20 to 30 minutes going over finger placement, wrist, arm, shoulder, and Adam feels like it's very passive. He uses like these fingers. This one's on the side, and it feels very lead-sided to him rather than trail-sided. But the advantage is, obviously, how much around the shaft rotation do you have? You're minimizing it, right? But how much in plane motion do you have? A whole bunch. How much out of plane motion do you have? Very little. So what you're doing by going to the claw is you're going to the main mover, which is the in-plane motion, the in-plane rotation of the club, and you're minimizing the around the shaft, and you're minimizing the out of plane. Now, in theory, that sounds to me like everybody should be doing the claw. Well, again, it gets back to coordination. I've got tons of people that come to me with the claw, and they look horrible doing it. Their performance on downhill, uphill, side hill is horrible, but they're good inside of 3 feet. Well, why don't you do it inside of 3 feet or inside of 5 feet or whatever, and then go conventional for your speed control. That's an option. But yeah, Justin Rose started with me on the claw. he went back to the conventional when he started working with Phil. And then Phil and I are very good friends. And Phil called me up one day. He goes, "Man, Rosie's graphs look fantastic with the claw. He's going back to it." I'm like, "Yeah, I could have told you that 2 years ago." But you know, sometimes when you don't get immediate results, you don't stick with something. And that's the great thing that Phil Kenyon has done a great job with Rosie, is keeping that cat corralled and being focused on just doing it that way, because it's the most efficient way for him to do it. And then Phil's obviously the best putting coach on the planet when it comes to coaching practice and setting up structure for some players that need that type of coaching.
Yeah, it's great here that HackMotion has been helping some of the top tour players in the world as well.
Absolutely. It's a great product. It's simple to use. It's easy. It's compatible with Apple. That's huge.
That's huge.
Holy cow.
So the question about junior players, what putting skill is most important to develop for junior golfers?
Green reading is the first skill. And then learning to not just control distance, but effective speed. So you can have a 10-footer uphill that's rolling at an effective stimp of, say, 8 on a 2.5-degree slope, and on a downhill, it's rolling about effective stimp of 15 or 16. So they need to understand that not all 10-footers are equal when you're talking about effective stimp. So with juniors, it's getting not just their distance control down, but getting their to go to the next level, get them out of kindergarten, get them into elementary school and junior high, and I'm talking from a development standpoint here, is get them appreciating speed and respecting slope and using slope. It's not just a 10-footer. It's a 10-footer that's downhill right to left that plays this fast. That makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
And then start line. Start line would be obviously face, learn to control face rotation. And etc. But yeah, I never intended to work with junior golfers. It just kind of evolved that way. When you got 2 kids that are number 1 in the world for their age group, and they're winning, and then all of a sudden you get their friend, and then their friends finish in the top 5, and then you get both of their friends, and next thing you know, you got your books full of junior golfers. So it's like I never intended to be the junior putting guy, but I'm no longer traveling on tour because of COVID. And to be quite honest with you, I've had more fun this year skiing and getting away from golf that I might not return to tour travel at all. So they can come see me if they want, that's fine. But I'm not for everybody.